Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. There's actually some agreement with my good colleague from Montgomery County. I'm glad that there's finally some truth that, PlanCon will be bonded. It's not a subtraction. We didn't cut $195 from the education fund. I'm glad that truth's getting out. If the governor had it unilaterally vetoed 68% of the budget that was agreed to, like your line item, students would have gotten their grants. We wouldn't be discussing, cuts to the next governor's veto to your line item. 1460 was a holistic budget that was a responsible spending plan that did not saddle taxpayers with massive tax increase on massive tax increases. So some agreement with my colleague across the line. It's good. It feels good. Couple follow-up questions on the targeted industry cluster certificate program. When you're looking at those targeted industries, are they set by Department of Labor by using high priority occupations? Do they shift, or are they kind of static?
The program had 3 different clusters of employment that were identified back. Now, we worked with the Department of Labor and Industry and with the Department of Education in identifying those. Now, the clusters have not changed, but we have continually added new academic majors that fall under them. So every year, there's a few more added for students to participate in.
Okay. We have a local businessman. There was job training for welders. The entity that did that ended up pulling out of the Hanover area in York County. So we had 2 businesses that actually work with a high school doing some welding training to students. It's I think like a 2-year program, like $4,000 tuition. So, but great training. What certificate or what do programs need to become to be eligible to get into that program for their students?
Well, they have to be offered by a federally Title IV eligible institution, which means they're eligible to provide federal Pell Grants. They have to be 10 weeks in length minimum, but less than 2 years in length, and they have to be accredited through one of the U.S. Department of Education recognized accreditors. Okay.
Great information. Student debt. A colleague of mine, she is on the Education Committee, not on the Appropriations Committee. Is there any analysis done to try to look at the amount of medical student or professional students' debt versus regular student debt? We have some great institutions that provide some great physician medical training. Obviously, doctors have a huge debt load going through medical school. Is there analysis to try to see if, in fact, Pennsylvania's student debt load is a result of kind of more professional training versus your normal 4-year, 2-year college student debt?
Yeah, I don't know any specific studies, but I will say that the reason the debt load is so high in Pennsylvania is the mixture of the students, or the schools. If you take a look at the schools, we have a mix of public schools, 2-year schools, and we also have 4-year schools. And those 4-year schools and graduate schools too. People will come out with higher debt, especially going through the graduate schools.
Okay. And with less high school students graduating, do you think that will force higher education consolidate and start to compete, thus reducing tuition, looking at their cost side? Do you think that'll be effect out of that?
It's an interesting thought. I mean, the demographics are playing out in various ways right now across the country. 4 or 5 years ago, it was probably 21 million folks that were eligible for higher education. Now it's about down to 19 million. Mm-hmm. So there's a demographic trend. There's probably, in geographic areas at least in Pennsylvania, less high school students that are coming out. And the various areas also have different demographics based on rural areas or urban areas, or in the east or the west of Pennsylvania. So there's different dynamics playing out. And, what you're really asking, I think, is do the normal laws of supply and demand work here? And they don't, because there's so many transfer payments in between, federal grants, state grants, student loans. And so you would think that would occur more directly, but it hasn't because the funding is still there.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.